The 70s was the decade of disco, bell-bottoms, and some of the most exciting cars ever launched. However, not all vehicles from that era deserve a comeback. Imagine driving down the road in your Ford Pinto, hoping you don't get rear-ended, or squeezing into an AMC Gremlin where compact was a sarcasm. Today, we're revealing 20 of the worst American cars of the 1970s, vehicles that may make you grateful for today's engineering. So buckle up if your seatbelt still works, because it's time to relive the automotive flops that are best to be forgotten. 1. AMC Gremlin, 1970. Let's start our list with the 1970s AMC Gremlin, a car that actually redefined compact and eccentric. With its hatchback design and that distinct, well, let's call it unique style, the Gremlin was American Motors' bold answer to the oil crisis. It promised fuel efficiency, but delivered a lot of odd charm and a few mechanical problems instead. Sure, it had Levi's denim upholstery, which sounds cool until you realize the handling was more sluggish than sporty. By 1978, the Gremlin had traveled its final mile, but it remains a cheeky reminder that being different isn't always better. 2. Chrysler Imperial, 1970. Shifting to the 1970 Chrysler Imperial, a car that doesn't seem to understand the meaning of luxury at all. This fuselage-styled behemoth was a visual disaster, with slab-sided fenders and a design that appeared to be from a previous decade. The Imperial, powered by a 440 cubic inch V8, had impressive numbers on paper, but couldn't keep up with its competitors' larger, more refined engines. It was a mashup of cheaper Chrysler parts, wearing an ill-fitting luxury costume that led to a sales flop and a drop in resale value. In short, the Imperial was a grand vision that went horribly wrong, leaving luxury buyers perplexed and looking for alternatives. 3. Ford Maverick, 1970. Third place goes to the 1970 Ford Maverick, which attempted to shake things up, but ultimately failed. The Maverick's long hood and short deck gave it an outdated appearance, and its interior space was smaller than that of the Volkswagen Beetle it was meant to rival. The ride was rough and unrefined, with suspension that could make you seasick, and steering that seemed disconnected from reality. The cheap interior felt like a slap in the face, and the reliability issues, such as rust and failing suspension parts, did not help. Despite its initial sales due to low pricing and the fuel crisis, the Maverick quickly became a forgettable addition to Ford's lineup. 4. Pontiac Catalina, 1970. Here comes the 1970 Pontiac Catalina. This car was so bulky and uninspired that it could have served as the poster child for what not to drive in the 70s. Critics frequently derided the Catalina as one of the most ugly Pontiacs ever produced, referring to its enormous schnoz front end. It came packed with a variety of V8 engines that provided power but lacked agility, making it feel slower and challenging. Add to that variety of quality issues, like electrical problems and rusting body parts, which made it hard for the Catalina to compete in a market that was moving towards more fuel-efficient and stylish cars. The Catalina's legacy is less about impressive engineering and more about what happens when design and execution fail. 5. Chevrolet Vega, 1971. Next up we have Chevrolet Vega from 1971. GM's valiant attempt of competing imports ended up in the Car Hall of Shame. The Vega began with high expectations, but quickly became known for its laughable flaws. With thin, rust-prone sheet metal and a cooling system that caused the engine to overheat faster than a summer day in the desert, the Vega quickly became more likely to leave you stranded than to impress you. Its aluminum engine block, intended to save weight, instead resulted in oil burning and premature failure. Despite its initial success, it gained notoriety as a rust bucket and engine disaster. By the late 1970s, the Vega had become more of a cautionary tale than a road warrior. 6. Buick Apollo, 1973. Awarding the 6th place to the 1973 Buick Apollo, which is widely regarded as one of the most forgettable rides of the 1970s. This vehicle was essentially a disguised Chevrolet Nova with the same platform, similar styling, but with a different badge. The Apollo's unimpressive design and lackluster performance made it as exciting as watching paint dry. The car's dull, uninteresting driving experience could not be improved by either of the two drab inline-six or humdrum V8 engines found under the hood. When you combine quality concerns like rust and electrical malfunctions, you have a car that has left a lot of owners puzzled. The Apollo had a brief existence before its rivals overshadowed it due to sales that hardly increased and a shift in the market toward more unique designs. 7. Oldsmobile Omega, 1973, heading on to our next contender, the 1973 Oldsmobile Omega, which highlights that being part of the GM X-Body family does not guarantee success. This car came with a 250 cubic inch inline-six engine that barely had enough power to move, and the optional 350 cubic inch V8 wasn't doing much better. Owners complained about slow acceleration and poor performance, making it less of a sports car and more of a sleepy sedan. Another haunting thing for its owners was its lack of dependability, which included frequent brake failures, transmission issues, and electrical gremlins. It is understandable why the Omega failed to stand out in a crowded market when you consider some rust problems and poor build quality. It's a classic example of a vehicle that was more about disappointment than driving enjoyment. 8. Ford Mustang II, 1974. The 1974 Ford Mustang II is ranked 8th, and likely other of this list, it's more popular for its flaws than its performance. Called as Pinto in a party dress, this Mustang's base 2.3-liter inline-4 that rarely managed 88 horsepower, so it was hardly the magical muscle car that enthusiasts had hoped for. Even if you upgrade to the 2.8-liter V6, you will still only get 105 horsepower. With emissions regulations sapping its limited power, the Mustang II was more about boring drives than thrilling performance. The design was also a letdown, with an awkward stance and poor build quality that made it feel like a compact car pretending to be something more. The handling was also bad, with a floaty ride and a lack of excitement for driving. Though it sold well at first, it is remembered as a low point in Mustang history, representing the dreaded malaise era of automotive design. 9. Ford Gran Torino Elite, 1974. The 1974 Ford Gran Torino Elite is the next car in line. This vehicle is renowned for falling short in practically every category. It wasn't the personal luxury coupe it claimed to be, with its so-called ugly front end and a design that mirrored a mix of old-fashioned models. The Elite's handling and underpowered engines prevented it from offering any exciting driving experiences, and its performance was every bit as unimpressive as its appearance. It was positioned as Ford's late entry into the personal luxury market, where it was unable to compete with more seasoned rivals such as the Chevrolet Monte Carlo and Pontiac Grand Prix. Due to its exorbitant cost and dull design, the Gran Torino Elite proved to be a forgettable failure. 10. AMC Pacer, 1975. Next, we have the 1975 AMC Pacer, a best example of the phrase, "It's the thought that counts." The Pacer's infamous fishbowl design made it seem like either a bold step into the future or a huge, glassy mistake. Though visually striking, its spherical form and expansive windows turned it into a rolling fish tank with appalling cargo capacity. Poor quality control resulted in rushed assembly, leaks, squeaks, and overall unreliability. The engines of the Pacer struggled to produce enough power while maintaining fuel efficiency. Even the worst designs can occasionally find admirers, as evidenced by the Pacer's current quirky cult status, in spite of these missteps. 11. Bricklin SV-1, 1975. It's time for the 1975 Bricklin SV-1, an automobile that was a complete bust, despite its high goals of becoming the sports car of the future. It appeared to be a space-age fantasy with its gaudy gull-wing doors and fiberglass and acrylic body, That is, until you tried to drive it. Early models frequently had warped body panels and more leaks than a colander due to the extremely poor build quality. The electro-hydraulic system of the doors was infamous for breaking down, leaving you to wonder if you needed a magician or a mechanic to open them. The SV-1 was neither fast nor enjoyable to drive because of its unimpressive engines under the hood and poor handling. Costing more than a Corvette but providing much less, it quickly turned into a financial black hole. 12. Chevrolet Monza, 1975. Turning to 12, we have the 1975 Chevrolet Monza, a car that attempted to fly but landed with a thud. The Monza's performance was more sleepy than sporty, with 0 to 60 miles per hour times that seemed to take an eternity, and a range of engines that hardly registered a dent on the speedometer. If that wasn't awful enough, the owners had to deal with electrical gremlins, leaks, and rust as if they were standard features due to the terrible build quality. The Monza's identity crisis caused it to struggle in showrooms, as it was stuck in a confusing middle ground, too small to be a true sports car, and too boring to be a classic American cruiser. In spite of this, it strangely turned into a collectible, demonstrating maybe how blind nostalgia can be at times. 13. Mercury Bobcat, 1975. The 1975 Mercury Bobcat, which debuted in the unlucky 13th position, is evidence that sometimes rebranding alone is insufficient. The Bobcat was basically a Ford Pinto with a different badge, and it shared all the same problems, such as poor performance and a drab appearance. Its engines provided as much thrill as a snail race, and its appearance didn't do any help either. When you combine the infamous fuel tank safety concerns that shadowed its Pinto sibling, you have a recipe for automotive ignorance. It makes sense that the Bobcat was unable to succeed and quietly withdrew by 1980, leaving behind a legacy as lackluster as the vehicle itself. 14th Pontiac Astre, 1975, sliding into the 14th spot. The 1975 Pontiac Astre was basically a Chevrolet Vega disguised. Unfortunately, it didn't look good in that disguise. This car felt like you were dragging a boulder uphill because of its 2.3-liter engine, which could only muster roughly 90 horsepower. What about quality control? Better described as a quality disaster. The notorious Vega's rust issues and a long list of electrical glitches were carried over to the Astre. All it takes to make an automobile unrecognizable is a design so boring that it could put insomnia sufferers to sleep. By 1977, the Astra had faded away, leaving a legacy best left in the rearview mirror. 15. Chevrolet Chevette, 1976. The 1976 Chevrolet Chevette is the next car on our list, which shows that General Motors was really having a moment in the 1970s, but not in a good one. This disaster was not like the others because it had a 65 horsepower engine that could hardly pull itself to 60 miles per hour in less than 20 seconds. What's inside? Consider it a master class in doing less with less. Rust was essentially a factory option, and although it did sell well, that was primarily due to its extremely low price. The Chevette gained notoriety in the automotive industry as a hit for all the wrong reasons. 16. Dodge Aspen, 1976. Continuing our journey of 1970s automotive mishaps, we arrive at the 1976 Dodge Aspen, a rust-prone, recall-ridden disaster that managed to win Car of the Year. Chrysler's attempt to swap out the outdated Dart for a contemporary, fuel-efficient compact car was a complete failure. A laundry list of recalls longer than a CVS receipt and a body that dissolved like an Alka-Seltzer in water, the Aspen presented a compelling case for Chrysler's bankruptcy. Well, it did look nice on paper at least. I guess Motor Trend was high when they awarded this dumpster fire the title of Car of the Year. The one redeeming feature of the Aspen? Giving mechanics and body shops around the country a reliable source of income. The Aspen, a genuine icon of the 1970s, demonstrated that occasionally, Even a blind squirrel can locate a nut. 17. Plymouth Volaré, 1976. After the Dodge Aspen, we come across another treasure of misfortune from the 1970s, the 1976 Plymouth Volaré. If you thought the Aspen had issues, get ready for an even longer list of issues with this car. It's worthy of a horror film. The Volaré was the subject of 8 significant recalls in 1976 alone, ranging from potentially fatal suspension problems to fire hazards. The Slant 6 engine was so weak that it took more than 15 seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour, making the performance ridiculous. It felt like you were driving a rolling disaster with the way it handled and braked. Even though the Volaré won Motor Trend's Car of the Year, its reputation quickly soured, making it a shining example of hurried and insufficient automotive design. 18. Dodge Monaco, 1977. Next up, we have the 1977 Dodge Monaco, a car that perfectly captures the essence of automotive mediocrity. You'd think it would have some zip with engines like the 318 and 360 cubic inch V8s, but instead, it was as exciting to drive as a sloth under the influence of sedatives. Its heavy construction meant that acceleration was slow and handling was more akin to navigating a cruise ship than a vehicle. The Monaco was a parade of electrical gremlins, mechanical hiccups, and rust in terms of quality. It was as exciting from a design standpoint as a beige wall. The Monaco served as a stark reminder of how far American automobiles had fallen in a decade that was desperate for innovation. 19. Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Diesel, 1979. Second last of our list is the 1979 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Diesel that will make you wish you had a horse and buggy, a smoky, unreliable mess. This oil-burning monstrosity was the car equivalent of a dumpster fire, a hastily planned mishap that frequently left owners stranded on the side of the road. A car only a masochist could adore, the Cutlass Supreme Diesel had a mechanical fuel injection pump as intricate as a Swiss watch and head gaskets that blew like a trumpet section. At least it got excellent fuel economy while it was actually operating, though. An engineering department run by bean counters is what happens to this diesel dud, a true milestone in GM's quest to build the worst car of the 1970s. 20. Ford Pinto, 1971 to 1980. We conclude our tour of automotive blunders with the notorious Ford Pinto, 1971 to 1980, a vehicle that redefined the concept of safety oversight. The Pinto was rushed into production with a dangerous design flaw. The fuel tank was dangerously positioned between the rear bumper and axle in order to compete with the influx of Japanese imports. Tests revealed fuel leaks at only 20 miles per hour, which is a charming feature that turned minor rear-end collisions into potential fireballs. Ford's cost-benefit analysis showed that settling lawsuits was less expensive than resolving the problem. What was the outcome? A tragic history of deaths, injuries, and a well-earned reputation as a prime example of corporate negligence. Thanks for cruising through our list of the 20 worst American cars from the 1970s. We hope you enjoyed the ride and got a few laughs along the way. If you've got a car in mind that you think deserves the top spot on this dubious list, we want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a lively debate going. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to our channel for more content that dives deep into the history. Ring the bell so you're always in the loop for our latest episodes. See you next time.